Welcome to the Owner's Pride podcast, where we discuss all aspects of auto detailing with successful detailers and industry leaders around the world. From San Diego, California, your host and our friend, Dan E. Williams. Take it away, Danny.
Welcome to the Owner's Pride podcast. We're bringing it to you. This is a very special day today. I've reached into the trick bag. I went into my Theta Chi alumni page and I figured what a great place for a whole bunch of people who are business people who, went to school, graduated college for business, and a really great group of guys from different fields all over that are going to be completely relevant to our small business podcast and helping you guys grow your business. Today, first of all, I got to say this. If you enjoy this podcast and you're getting something out of it, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to it on one of the podcast outlets, please like and subscribe. And heck, take a minute out and write a review. It really helps me out a ton. Okay, had to do that. Now, I got Paulo with me, the Canadian rep. Paulo, how are you doing, sir?
Fantastic. It's a first cold weekend, so business is slowing down. So marketing will be more relevant than ever because we got to bring them in the same way. Right? But definitely slowing down. We're on a minus 10 Celsius, so it's getting cold. We got snow on the ground, and yeah, we're getting there. Winter's coming.
It was cloudy here in San Diego this weekend, so.
Cloudy and plus.
so I'm feeling it too. All right, and then and Matthew Gilbert, and this is maybe one of the longest introductions that I've ever had to do, but he got his undergraduate and is a Theta Chi from UC Santa Barbara. He got his MBA from Woodbury in Burbank. He got his PhD? Getting his PhD.
Oh, just starting.
Starting his PhD in management at UCNC Greensboro, and he is a lecturer of marketing for Coastal Carolina University. Holy macaroni. Matthew, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. How are you guys?
Man, doing very well. Paulo, have we ever had somebody that's had this many credentials in a subject? Like, I've been detailing for 15, 20 years, and I don't think I have this many credentials in detailing. Holy cow. Okay, so Matthew, let's do a little bit, let's talk about you a little bit and kind of build some context of where you came from, how you got into marketing, just kind of some of your views. And I mean, gosh, that is a whole mess of school. So you have both school and real life experience.
Right.
So how did it start? Is when I was a little kid, they would say, what do you want to be? And everybody would say, oh, I want to be a fireman or I want to be a policeman. Right. Nowadays, I guess kids say they want to be a YouTuber. But
yeah, I think so.
But you perhaps said you want to be a marketer.
No, actually, early on, I thought I wanted to be a heart surgeon, but I realized I really am not good at science. I don't have a problem with blood per se, but I'm not really good at science or math, which is ironic because my ultimate dad joke is my worst subject is the first syllable of my name. So that's my best dad joke. But when I had always been drawn to communication, mainly writing. And so even as far back as grade school, I was working on the yearbooks for my grade school and learning to develop film and take pictures and doing layouts and things like that. So I have a background in journalism, essentially. So in middle school, junior high, high school, I worked on and was editor of the yearbooks. I was also editor of my high school newspaper for a year. And then when I went to UC Santa Barbara, I actually worked on the yearbook there for 2 years. So mainly my background is in communication or writing or basically storytelling. And broadly speaking, that's really where my interest and my orientation to marketing resides, because I always look at marketing and I always tell my students this: marketing is essentially storytelling. right? You're telling different stories to different people to elicit different reactions, but essentially that's what you're doing. You're telling a story to a group of people that are external to your organization, and you're trying to communicate who you are, what you do, mostly why you do it, and then what makes you different, what makes you better, how do you add value to that customer's experience.
You know, we take a lot of younger businesses and newer businesses and coach them. And one of the first things that I do is I make them, especially a brand new business, read the book Story Brand, which is about making it a story. So interesting that you said that. And that's really step number one, because it takes somebody's frame of mind out of like thinking of washing cars as being maybe a hustle. And it makes them think of their whole thing that they're doing as a concept of a business.
Yeah, and I think, and what's interesting for me is, so my undergraduate degree is actually in English and creative writing. And I think my plan early on was probably, or would have naturally fit more into journalism. And when I went to UC Santa Barbara, I had initially gone in as a communication major, thinking it was media, right? Thinking that's kind of what it meant, though, so that I can kind of continue this orientation experience I have in media production and whatnot. But when I got there, I realized it was really more of the academic orientation or exploration into how we communicate, right? And so my school didn't have a media degree, so to speak. So for me, English was the next best option because it allowed me to create, right? It allowed me to write things and to understand other written pieces. But really what kind of made it work for me was I was able to get accepted into this creative writing emphasis. At the time, they didn't have minors. I think they do now. But that allowed me to do short story courses, fiction writing, mystery writing, over 2 semesters. One semester, I wrote a 1-act play. The next semester, it was acted out and produced. So I got a lot of experience through that emphasis in more of the creative element of things. And then my very first job out of college is kind of where everything started to click into gear. I got a job as a technical writer for a medical device manufacturing firm. And I'll let you figure it out, but they did visual enhancement implants.
At first, I was going to say that doesn't sound too exciting, but now all of a sudden, maybe it's not that bad.
The funny thing is the job itself was like very corporate, right? Like everything was gray. The office was gray. My cubicle was gray, right? Lots of rules, lots of regulations. But what happened is, so mostly my role was to write like assembly procedures and standard operating procedures and very like basic stuff. But interestingly, that experience still carries forward to today where it's really helped me to write in a way that's very declarative and very instructional and very clear, because a lot of our folks who were putting the pieces together, literally, for them, a lot of them, English was a second language. So we had to use really simplified language and very clear. And so it gave me a lot of experience in that. It also gave me a lot of experience using Microsoft Word with formatting and style sheeting and all these kind of things that I try not to take for granted now, but are really just second nature. And it's all because of that first job. But what really happened, I don't remember how it happened, but at some point, and this is where it goes from gray to colorful, I guess you could say. At some point, somebody in the marketing department, either because I was chatting with them or somebody found out, I don't know, someone became aware of my background in media and editing. And so the marketing department started bringing me brochures to copy edit. And so they had like before and after pictures, and I was like, am I allowed to look at this work? I was like, I really wasn't sure. But that's kind of what lit the fire and the intrigue in marketing for me, because I've always told people I've had this sort of odd duality to me. So on the one hand, I have this, what I call my bohemian side, which is my artsy creative side. I have a background in oil painting. I used to draw a lot, watercolors. I did stained glass work. A lot of this was in high school. But then I kind of have this business side. So I have this bohemian and business, and the percentages shift depending on what I'm doing. But I've always had this orientation to practical things and sort of anchored in reality things, but at the same time coming up with crazy creative ideas and stories and things like that. So I always appreciated the ability to do something within the realm of reality, I guess you could say. And so at that first job, I started taking extension courses in marketing, and that's how I got my marketing experience initially. So
What marketing is kind of really is a combination of those things, though, because I would think, well, it seems to me there's not like just one set rule, like say in math, where 2 + 2 = 4. But you have to have a concept and almost a creative, artistic idea to try to get that story to the people correctly. So what a perfect blend.
yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to obviously define and achieve goals, but it's not, it's a combination of art and science, basically. It's kind of basically, another way of saying what you were saying. It's a process of having achievable or quantifiable goals, but you're kind of often doing it in a qualitative kind of a way. So
Yeah, I think that's one of the really neat things about owner's pride, and different from companies that I worked at before, where there's 4 people who are essentially the bosses or the owners, and one of them is very analytical. Everything has to go on spreadsheets, and it is to the number. There's like really no emotion in any of his decisions. It's like sales are going to pick up on this day of the month because that's what my numbers are going to tell me. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. I got one guy who is like came from the car dealership world, and he could sell snow to an Eskimo. And then I've got a father and son team who had a detailing business that is very successful that they grew. So like we really can hit it all. And now you have all of those things in just one head.
I am a multiple personality marketer. I don't
So, oh my gosh, there's so much to crack open with marketing. I mean, my questions are just overflowing. This is the neatest thing that we really don't go off of much of a list, or we usually in the podcast I'll just ask kind of leading questions, but you made a list of like 6 things, kind of a skeleton or an outline, which is pretty brilliant. And I want to go off of that today. And okay. Paulo, you feel free to jump in here anytime you want. And so we'll talk about these concepts. I sent you the list too, and then we'll kind of plug in questions on each one of them. And I think it'll be pretty neat.
That's good.
All right. So right before we hop into that, so now you do lectures. Like, does that mean do you have a class and you teach that class and you stand up in front and lecture it, or are you just like a component where a couple times a week you do a lecture for somebody else's class and all of the students come in to hear your lecture? And if it's B, what do they take away from just a one-time, like going to see a movie almost?
Sure. Well, it's more the first. So currently I have 5 classes. I actually have 4 marketing classes. Well, 3 pure marketing classes, like introduction to marketing. Then I have basically a consumer behavior class, and then I have 1 sales class, like a personal selling class. And so I've always my stage in the rank, so to speak, as a lecturer, I typically teach 5 classes. And at the moment they're all virtual, but in a non-COVID world, I would be in a classroom. And typically that's what I've been doing. So I'll have courses. My classes meet twice a week, and for a semester. So I love teaching because I joke that it's kind of my way to stay a student. It's like my way to stay in school. And I don't know, it's weird. I feel like I keep getting older, but they keep getting younger. I don't understand.
Right. Isn't that a line from a movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it struck me this year, like when I was realizing how old they were, and I, did the math in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I'm chronologically old enough to be any of their fathers, right? Like they're finally like the age of a kid I could have. I'm like, oh my God.
Do you have any kids?
I do. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. So.
Yeah, I never had kids.
Kids, yeah.
Paulo, you have kids, yeah?
Yeah, 15 and 17, so kind of the same age bracket. But
right in the range, yeah.
When I teach at the ski club, and our instructors, every season we get new instructors, and it's high school and university guys, and yeah, they're coming younger and younger, and we're getting older. And
I tell you, what's really strange is like if you don't have kids, you don't have anything to no point of reference, right? So when a point in case, my our regional managers here, they're both like 30 years old. Well, like you were just saying, I'm old enough to be their dad. Like I'm their parents' age, and I don't think of them like that. I always just think of them as a peer.
Right.
And then sometimes, you know, you see how life experience, like crazy, right. Getting old.
It's a weird thing.
Okay, so we're just going to start. Let's just hammer right into this. So your first number one is why. Why are you in business? Right.
So a lot of people sometimes have this strange idea that being in business is easy street, right? Prior to here, I was actually teaching in Dubai for 6 years. And the last 2 of those years, I was teaching in an innovation and entrepreneurship program that was actually developed by Stanford. And their Ministry of Education paid Stanford something crazy like $20 million to make a class and curriculum and a training program for faculty to teach innovation and entrepreneurship countrywide, right? And so this was always the first conversation I had with them, because they all thought, I would always say that I think people often misinterpret being an entrepreneur or having your own business as, you know, laying in a pool, floating on a pool with a drink with an umbrella as money just flows into your bank account. And I think that's the common misconception. I said, you guys are thinking of retirement. That's what you're thinking. And I said, you know, owning a business, running your own business is basically the opposite of retirement. It's essentially self-imposed slave labor. And so that's always the first question. Why are you even doing this? Like, why do you want to do this? What is your motivation for doing so? Sometimes, you know, it's because you want that independence, and that does come with a business, but it also comes with a lot more responsibility, right? So you really have to understand why. What is your motivation? What is the reason you're doing it? And you need to be clear on that, because ultimately that will help you answer the remaining questions. And it also gives you a little bit of context for them as well. And it kind of acts as both your anchor and your wings as you're looking to start, scale, and maintain your business, so that you can kind of come back to that. Like, why are you there, right? Kind of basically your purpose in starting the business. Yeah.
It reminds me of, there's a meme, and it shows a glacier or an iceberg, and the top of it's just a little bit sticking out, and that's what the people see, but they don't see that huge root that's on the bottom of it. That's all the work. See, I've seen the same thing happen with employees that I've had in the past, and they see you going and doing coding jobs and, you know, making great money and doing all this, and then they're like, well, you're making this much money, but they don't see all of the work that you're getting, the work that you're ordering, the supplies, that you're doing your books, that you're going to pay your taxes, and doing all the scheduling. You know, they just don't really see it.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that analogy or that metaphor. You know, they see the hot dog, but not what goes into making the hot dog, right? As they say.
Paulo, what you got?
No, I exactly the same. I was just at a tire shop with a friend of mine. It's Sunday. He's working because with winter coming, and exactly the same people. Oh, you got this huge shop, but they don't see that on a Sunday he's by himself, just trying to pick up the load and trying to get it nice and sorted for Monday. So when the staff comes in, he's got everything ready. But people don't see it, and we're working Saturdays, Sundays, and through. So it's the imposed slavery, like you said, but also it's the mindset. If you don't have the right mindset, forget about it. There's no way you can do it.
Yeah, I've seen some people just don't have the self-motivation it takes to have their own business. And that may not mean that they're not smart or anything like that. I've got a really good friend for many years, and he works in computer software, and he does very well. It's a very cyclical business, though, so when the layoffs come, he's one of the people that gets chopped. So he tried to start his own business, and even though he's super successful in that, he just kind of floundered because he did not have what it takes within him. So I think looking really and being honest, you know, with yourself, if you're thinking of starting a business, is really important. Because I always thought when I started my business, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to take vacations whenever I want. I'm going to take time off. But I ended up working so much more than I did, which actually in turn probably made me a really good employee as I am now, because I'm a worker bee. I love it. I get bummed a little bit. I'm glad that we're doing this podcast on the weekend, because I get a little bummed on the weekend when I don't have anything, it all settles down. And Matthew, you're probably going to say it should never settle down, because there's marketing that you need to do.
Always.
So that'll take us right into number 2, the what. Define your person, product, service, or organization. So this is, I imagine, finding your avatar, or your target customer.
Well, it's a little bit more of like, what is your business, right? Like, and this exercise, this list derives a little bit from an activity I used to do with a marketing class that I taught for UCLA Extension. So what I was telling them is, okay, so I'm gonna have you do a marketing plan, and I want you to pick a person, a product, a service, or an organization to develop it for. So again, it's defining these things early. So partly why I put person is because sometimes people overlook that, you can market a person, or you could market yourself. Personal branding has really emerged in more recent years as a really interesting area of opportunity for people. So don't overlook that you can market a person, either yourself or you can promote somebody else, right? So be clear on who you're marketing or what you're marketing, essentially, right? What's your product? What's your service? What's your organization about? And understand the difference between those components. And if you are marketing just one of them, or if you're marketing some combination, right? Sometimes a business, like some businesses, their brands, but you don't know the business really. Like I think Johnson & Johnson, for example, right? You might know a lot of their brands, but you might not even realize that Johnson & Johnson is the parent company, right? Some companies like Tesla, like I know Tesla, but I don't think I know any of their model numbers, but I know the company, right? So in some cases, the company is really what's more of the marketing story, as we were talking about. In others, it's sometimes certain products within it, or like I said, if you offer a service, and a lot of times, like in a car company, you're offering both a product and a service, right? Just because of the nature of the product, right? You'll offer servicing. The service is the repair or the anything that goes with it that would actually fit within what you guys are doing, right? One of those things could be, maintenance, detailing, any kind of visual enhancement or maintaining the value of a car, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, we made at our initial training when we brought our reps to Omaha. I had everybody sit down, and I took from StoryBrand. We did. Kind of as a group wrote a one-liner, and I think it was something to the effect of owner's pride ceramic is like a force field or a layer of protection for your car. Spend less time worrying and cleaning your car and worrying, and more time doing the things that you love. Something to that effect. Which was kind of trying to find the customer and tell them what we do, and really that's like giving you back your time, so you don't have to worry, knowing that your car is going to be worth more when you go to sell it or trade it in, and you can spend less time because it's easier to clean your car once ceramic coating is on there, and more time doing the things that you love. Did we hit the nail on the head at all? Did we swing the hammer even?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's about having kind of that catchphrase, or having that if you want to use an academic term, like your thesis sentence, right? Like what is it that you are, basically? So yeah, and what does it mean to other people, or what could it mean, like your exercise did? So yeah,
pretty fun.
This point on the awareness, I think we talked to some of the detailers, and they complain, I'm not doing enough coatings or paint corrections, but they marketing for interiors all the time. So they're posting about interiors, and they do an awesome job, but they forget about doing what they want to do is coatings and corrections. You got to market towards the coatings and corrections. And we see a lot of, especially the newer guys, doing that mistake, I see.
That's actually how DeMarcus started his business. He was just doing interiors originally. He wasn't even washing the outsides. Funny that you should say that.
But then he shifted to promoting the outside, and now he's doing outsides.
Indeed,
so that's
he is.
mind shift. A lot of people just quick because you got a lot of interiors, take pictures of interior work. But if you want to do that transition, you have to market towards your goals. So just post about polishing and corrections and coatings.
All right, so that takes us to number 3, the who, which was already kind of touched, maybe, but it says identify your market segments and your target audience. And I think that we've done that through the marketing company that we were working with, where they made like an avatar through interviews with detailers and customers to kind of find the quintessential customer that is going to have Owner's Pride ceramic put onto their car. But Matthew, please.
Yeah, exactly that. Like you want to, a lot of times one of the best exercises to do is exactly what you just said. You make personas, right? That's a very common thing to do. So through a variety of means, you want to determine where's your sweet spot, basically, right? Who are the people in your neighborhood, right? Who is it that would most benefit from your product or services, and who are they? Like, what are they about? You start listing some combination of demographics, psychographics, and trying to paint a portrait essentially of, it's not always just one group, and usually it's not, but you want to start with one, like a primary group, like who's our initial main target, and then you start thinking about like other people, even things like, okay, who are the people in those people's lives who maybe we could target to buy our products or services as a gift for those people, right? So you start with one place, like a root, and then the tree grows from there, because you start thinking of what are all the connected, either directly or indirectly, other people who would maybe buy the product or service, not for their use, but to give as a gift also for those other people. So like in your case, obviously, it's probably primarily detailers and folks who are running their own entity, but you might find related markets, right? Other places where you might sell it, or maybe direct to consumer. I don't know, those kind of things. And that, you don't want to start with everything at the beginning, but start with one and then expand from there.
Yeah, which is really what we did. We our main customer currently is the professional detail businesses that are going to utilize and sell our products, as well as the customer that they're going to sell those products to. And on the other side, we have a full retail play that's going to unfold, but it's like you said, you can't do everything all at once. Right. So very, very comprehensive. I mean, gosh, we even, do private label stuff for other companies, and, it's a whole darn ball. All right, so let's see, Paulo, you got anything for that?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered some of the stuff on the previous one.
Okay. So the next one is where. Select the marketing channels you will leverage. And this one, super interesting, and holy moly. So I'm going to throw this out because this will let you think about how to really satiate my questions that I have. So it seems like the biggest channels for marketing currently, especially for our kind of business, is going through Facebook and Instagram currently. Now, in my head, it feels like I also want to be on Twitter. I also want to be on TikTok. I also want to be on YouTube. I want to make an omnipresence where, we kind of started doing something, just silly videos on Friday afternoons where I see there's a basketball beer challenge. So I made one with a bottle of our coating on a basketball and dropped it and caught it. We did a bottle flip challenge. These are just silly things. And obviously, no, that's not going to sell a ceramic coating to a customer doing a silly video like that. But my idea behind it is, by doing that, it's going to open up, almost what I'm doing right now. It's going to open up my brand and my message to a group who would never have maybe even ever heard of me in the first place. But, okay, you go. So really, I want to know, after you start, like, what makes the most sense? And please.
Well, like you said, there's always multiple platforms that you could leverage, right? The first question I would always say is, where are they now, like where are your target customers? So you already figure out who, right? So now where are they, right? What are the platforms that they primarily use? So that's something you would need to determine first. And like you said, I think Facebook tends to skew a little bit older, but that might work for some of your customers. Instagram and Snapchat are very popular with a younger demographic. Most of my students, like in Dubai, all of my students are on Snapchat almost exclusively. Snapchat and Instagram very heavily. Very few on Facebook, a few on Twitter. Here, I see a lot more TikTok here in the U.S. So I think for your kind of industry, certainly any visual medium is really where you want to be. Anything with media, right? Multimedia capabilities, because there's even a current meme like how it started and where we are, right? There's a kind of a before and after meme going on now, and that's perfect for what you guys do, right? Like how did the car look before? How does it now look, right? You show the results. So I think for you, like you said, like I think Twitter, I've always enjoyed Twitter. I've been on Twitter for about 12 years now. And in the old days of Twitter, it was a little bit more intimate. It was a little bit more, it felt a little bit more, almost more like a college hangout. It was very loose. And I remember getting a reply from MC Hammer once. I was very excited.
You were all stop Hammer time.
Twitter time. But as it's grown, you've seen a lot more, obviously, corporate engagement. And what always comes to mind is, in particular, like for some reason, like the fast food burger companies have this really funny relationship with each other. They kind of like trash talk each other on Twitter, but in like a playful way. And so that may or may not fit your brand, but that's where you can have a little more personality. I mean, you got to be careful. Twitter, obviously, nowadays is a little bit hypercharged with a lot of controversial back and forth kind of stuff. So you got to stay clear of that from a brand perspective. But for me, I really enjoyed Twitter because over the years that I've used it, it's allowed me to meet and connect with people I never would have met before. And it's actually how I found the current job that I'm in, because one of my colleagues now is actually someone in my PhD program. But the funny thing is, she and I follow each other on Twitter, and she posted the position on Twitter, but she didn't ever mention it to me directly, but I just happened to see it on Twitter because she and I follow each other, right? And so, just like for me, I find opportunities on Twitter. You might just stumble upon, random interest, or you can kind of like capitalize off of a trend or a trending hashtag. You got to be careful though, because the mistake that a lot of companies make though is they jump in on a hashtag without realizing what it really is, and they sometimes get themselves in trouble, right? So Twitter is very, very public, right? Like, I mean, all these things are mostly public, but Twitter, you can get yourself into trouble if you're not careful. So you also mentioned TikTok, I think, right?
Yeah.
I think TikTok would be great. I mean, I think I'm finally at that get off my lawn age with social media. So I haven't totally started messing with TikTok, but I can see its value. And I think you could do a lot. Like you see those TikToks where people are like dressed in one thing, and then they like throw up a pair of shoes, and then it switches, and they're like in another outfit. I mean, you could completely do that with like a before after with a car, like a car detail, right?
That's brilliant. You could use the same thing on. Now, can you take something like that would predominantly go on TikTok and it's a little video? So why wouldn't that be as good on Instagram or the other? Like, what makes some of the things only relevant more so to one channel? Like, what they don't bleed over.
Well, some things do. Some things you can repurpose as a secondary hit, so to speak. Like I've seen a lot. Actually, where I've seen most of the TikTok videos are on Instagram. People will reshare it on Instagram. The Instagram platform doesn't allow you to produce the video in the same way that TikTok's platform does. So you could do it there, and then again, multi-use it or cross-pollinate, as I sometimes say. And that also opens up a bigger audience too, because again, like I kept saying, I don't have TikTok on my phone, but I see a lot of TikTok videos because people reshare them on Instagram. So that's an opportunity as well. So yeah.
Do you think, or maybe there's a size or some kind of a metric that you would hit where it makes sense to have a marketing company doing all of this for you? Or at what point is it just to each person, like how busy they become? Because there's so much that you might not know, and you could just be kind of swinging in the dark, not hitting anything because you don't know. Does it make sense for a new company who's like really tight on funds to start out with a marketing company in some aspect? And if you would, how much should a company be spending of maybe say their gross per month towards marketing?
I'm going to give a kind of a college professor answer of it depends. I think it really does depend on the company, on the product, how competitive the industry is, where you are currently in it, where you want to go in it. You always need to be marketing, right? Now, maybe starting out, you do it yourself, but it depends on if it's detracting from your ability to manage the business, then you'll need to bring somebody on. The one thing that happens a lot, that companies do a lot to save money, is they'll hire like a college intern to do it. Now, college age students have a lot of personal hands-on experience with social media, but they're not always, not in every case, but they're not always the most strategically focused, or maybe they're not the most reliable. Plus they're in college, so you might be jumping from intern to intern every semester, and there's no consistency. Mm-hmm. So if you do bring someone on, it's really important to bring on someone who's in either a consulting capacity, which might be a good way to do it at first, to get some insight and ideas, and then bring somebody on as like a contractor, maybe before you bring it in-house. Now, it depends who is in your bag of tricks, so to speak, within your organization, but.
Okay. Well, the tough part is like you can't do everything, and you don't know everything. And this is a company. Can a company grow without having this? If in just doing it themselves? I mean, and I'm thinking for the small business, that's more of a localized, small time thing, more so than like what we're trying to do is we're trying to grow a national and a worldwide brand name recognition and really expand. So impossible for us.
Yeah, I mean, you always need to be marketing in some way, and even if you don't think you're marketing, you are, right? Because marketing, it comes across in even the passive things that you do, right? It's even things like what's your logo look like? What colors do you use? It's in the wording that you use. It's the way that you refer to things. So it kind of becomes like your brand basically permeates everything that you do, even if you don't mean it to. Now, well, let me put it this way. It needs to permeate everything you do. If you're not consistent in it, you'll get into conflicts because people will be confused about your messaging and what do you mean. So you always need to be clear on your marketing mission, so to speak, and these 6 steps, right? These criteria, because once you define this, even if you're not running a campaign, it helps to sort of, it's like your GPS, right? Now, I will say this: the part of marketing that most people often overlook is everything that happens before the promotion, right? So in a way, you're always marketing even if you're not promoting or at that stage, because we see as customers, what we see is basically the last couple of stages, which is the advertising, promotion, the visual, audio kind of component of it. But what precedes that is product research, development, design, all of those things, because you also, again, based on these 6 steps, you want to make sure that you're developing products or services that actually have a market. You can look at companies that, you kind of sometimes compare like a company like Google or Microsoft to Apple, and you can see which companies are more engineering driven, where sometimes they develop a solution in search of a problem. And then you look at a company maybe like Apple that is very customer centric, and really looks for ways to sort of capitalize on its current market and cater to it, while at the same time pushing boundaries a little bit. So you always want to make sure that you are developing products that fit with your market segments and target audience, right? So that comes in an earlier stage of marketing that most of us usually see as customers. But when it comes to product development and even product packaging, like earlier you guys were mentioning, sometimes I think Paulo was mentioning how sometimes businesses might focus on the interior that they can do and they neglect the exterior. Well, that's part of marketing, in a sense of helping to design packages, maybe, right? So maybe one way to help your distributors or your customers to not overlook those opportunities is to suggest packages for them, kind of like how Burger King or McDonald's does, like a number 1 and number 2 and number 3, because it was like you said, it can get easy to kind of fixate on one area that's either of your strength or expertise or greater interest, but you're overlooking other opportunities where maybe somebody who's wanting to do some kind of interior detailing or whatnot would also be interested in doing something exterior, maybe at a discounted price, but if you buy them all together, you're making that much more, you're generating that much more in revenue.
Yeah, that's really important because when I was training a new installer last week, and that's, you got to define the packages really well, and people don't realize not just the package, but that's what the client will be looking for. You need to have that package created that fits the client's needs. And also people need to realize how much time they're going to spend on the vehicle and set it up properly. Because it's not just a package because the neighbor is charging whatever, $200 for interior. You're not going to charge the same amount. You got to figure out what the client was looking for and also what time frame you're in and your profit. But you mentioned a really interesting thing. I think I know Dan is working on a couple of things, but if you can like prefab some of the packages, especially for the new installers, and also have a sales script to close the sales, that's huge. That's huge. I know what Dan is working on some of that stuff with us.
And you know what? Brian, just the whole menu thing, it came from Brian. He was helping somebody and they were asking him to review, but it was way too long. And it's really a lot easier to, and so many of the things, you know, we've got a guy he's a PhD in marketing. I read story brand in marketing. So, but I feel like I have some answers. But they say, make the choice as easy as possible because you have less options, and it just really focuses people in. Like they have the value meals, or 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it just makes it simple. You don't have to put that much brain power into it.
Right, and like you said, the key word is simplification, mostly for the customer because it's really easy to get overwhelmed. There's a video on YouTube. And the guy's name it's escaping me at the moment. I think his last name is actually Gilbert. But he has a video about having the paralysis of too much choice, right? If you give people too many choices, they don't know what to choose because they get overwhelmed, right? Now, I used to always pair that with a Malcolm Gladwell TED Talk when he talks about the origin of how we wind up with like 72 varieties of like spaghetti sauce, right? And so there's a happy medium somewhere between like 72 varieties of spaghetti sauce and like a dozen, right? Or something like that. And like you look at some examples, like you think about In-N-Out, right? Have you guys ever been to an In-N-Out burger?
I'm in San Diego, so yep.
That's right. Yeah, so you have, right? Okay. So they have a super simple menu. I think it's like 3 main things, right? It's like a burger, a cheeseburger, and like a double cheeseburger or something, right? Or something like that, right? So it's basically 3 options. But then they have their quote unquote secret menu, which is like the worst kept secret and right? But it's not really secret. It's just that's the detailed menu, right? Like they'll make a lot of other things, but for the average person coming in, they just want a hamburger, right? So they put out this quote unquote secret menu, and it's sort of a little sort of tongue in cheek secret because there's all these other things they'll do. But if they put that on the menu, people would be standing there for an hour trying to figure out what they want,
Yeah, I know the feeling. You get to a new place and you're looking at the menu. There's so many options.
Yeah.
Please get 1, 2, 3, and that's it.
If I go to a restaurant, I narrow it down to like 2 or 3 options, and then I let the waiter or waitress choose for me. I'm like, I want one of these things. Just surprise me.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant information, but if you ever go break bread with me, it's going to happen. What is something that you should look for in a marketing company to work for you? And I ask because, talking to different companies, they're so all over the place. And if you are a marketing company and you've gone to school and you've gotten an education in marketing, is that applicable across all the different options, or do you really need to find somebody who's focused on doing, one specific specialty that you go for? Because it seems like if marketing would be marketing, but I don't think that's going to be the case at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in some respects, if you get someone who is an adaptable kind of a person or an agency that's adaptable. I mean, you look at these big agencies, right? Like they handle lots of different kinds of companies. But some are known to specialize in some industries, right? Like there are some ad agencies, for example, that deal mainly with the auto industry, right? And that's their expertise. But my future brother-in-law, he works for BBDO in Mexico City, and he's done all kind of different ads, right, for different kind of products. So I don't know if it's necessary to have a specialist, so to speak. At some point it might be, but I think what you want to look for in an agency or even a consultant is, first of all, someone who's creative, right? Someone who has original ideas. Now, sometimes you can take kind of a more general idea and adapt it to your specific industry, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be the world's most original idea, but it needs to be something that is creative, innovative, that can be adapted at the very least to work with your industry and that fits with your market, so that their approach creatively and even practically kind of fits within the mindset of your target market. Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of, and I think I said this before, but we didn't hit it, and maybe this is not, an answer that's just a boilerplate answer, but is there like a 20%, or what percent should you be funneling back into your marketing to grow your brand and your business?
Typically, the number that I've seen most often as a kind of starting point is about 5%. 5% of your overall budget. But that in if you're looking to grow your market share, or if maybe you're in a really highly competitive industry, maybe 10. Now, that doesn't mean you can't put more in, and certain industries are more competitive. I mean, look at Coke. I mean, I'm trying to think how much Coke it's some insane amount of money. I'm trying to remember how much Coke spends a year on advertising, and it's not like nobody knows Coke exists or doesn't know Coke exists, right? But they just keep pushing, right? Because they know if they stop, I mean, who knows? Maybe Pepsi creeps up, right? Just because so much of marketing is just awareness or top of mind, right? So you at least need some percentage, and really the minimum or the sort of starting point is typically about 5%, and then you go from there, right?
Okay. All right, let's see. What's the next one? Says when, number 5. Outline the timeline that you will use for your campaign, which is really so. I think some of this, the company that we're with at the moment uses 411 for the social marketing side of it. We haven't really started the paid advertising side of it, but for the social media, and I think that's kind of does what you were saying. Like every one of them is not the ask that comes at the very end. You got a soft ask and then a hard ask. It makes sense. A lot of times it seems like it's just spinning wheels to me. And maybe this is because of my lack of knowledge, but it seems like I should be asking every single time. I should always have a call to action. It's hard for me to conceptualize why, when it's National Coffee Day, we have a post that's some coffee beans flying around that doesn't have anything to do with getting your car detailed or ceramic coated. And there's no ask on it. But to their point, they say, well, we're just creating this, and a community is what they're trying to do and create engagement, which makes sense. But again, I just, in my head, I don't see, if you're not asking them to do something, there's not a plan of action, something for them to click, for me to collect your info, then it just doesn't seem relevant to me. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't think you're entirely wrong. So I think, again, it's a balancing act. I totally understand the approach of building community engagement. But the thing is, you can always have some kind of an ask, but it doesn't need to be a selling kind of an ask, right? So like you just mentioned, National Coffee Day, and the first thing that came to my mind is you could do a post about, spilling coffee on your seat.
Now that makes sense. Oh, you're going through a Starbucks, spill this, our interior protectant is going to protect you. Right.
Right.
Oh.
It could just be awareness. It doesn't have to be buy the product. It could just be like, some kind of, it could almost be a funny post about a guy with like, too many cups of coffee and he's trying to drink them all and he spills them all and whatever, and you could just say, does your seat enjoy coffee as much as you? I don't know. I'm just making this up. But
That's brilliant. And it makes me feel disassociated. But man, you're right. That's the creative that you were talking about. Find somebody that's creative and is going to be, reaching into your market. All right. So so you have outlined the timeline that you will use for your campaign.
So, yeah, it's a combination of things. It's both things like, so in an ideal world, and this would vary by platform, but you would have certain days of the week that you would post content, right? Now, if you're on multiple channels, you might want to balance it out a little bit, right? So that you're not always on, you're not posting continuously so that you're spreading attention too thin, right? Because conceivably, you'll have people following you on more than one platform. But, so maybe you do a blog post every Wednesday, for example, right? Maybe you post on Twitter every other day. Maybe you post on Instagram on the in-between days. So you always have a continuous presence, but you're posting in different places so that no one platform gets stale, basically, right? Or overdone, Or if you're sending out emails, you don't want to send out too many. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I've been unsubscribing to even in the last 2-3 days from politicians begging me for money, right?
Oh my goodness.
Unsubscribe. Like, I think I'm going to vote for your opponent now because you've made me mad. You've emailed me too many times, So it's a combination of that kind of production schedule kind of a timeline, like when are you pushing out content? But it's also the bigger period, like when are you going to start that campaign? And then when are you going to end it? And that gives you a period of time to kind of start the clock, so to speak. And then you end it, and then you can measure results within a very defined period of time. And that gives you the ability to know if that campaign is working. I mean, certain campaigns never end. Like, is the Army still using Be All You Can Be? I can't remember. I know they changed it for a while. I think they used that one for a long time, right? Like, I think about really classic campaigns. Or Nike. They're using Just Do It Forever, right? Some campaigns just work. I mean, they're doing other campaigns, obviously, but you might have a core campaign that you never change, right? But by giving maybe a 3-month window or even a 1-month cycle, depends. Like maybe you want to capitalize on, the Indy 500, for example, right? So you have a promotion for all of May. Well, typically when it's in May, right? Or some car-related events, right? Or maybe you do something through a NASCAR season or something that's like seasonal or tied to some event or tied to some holiday. So you always want to have an idea of when you're going to start it and when you're going to end it. And then within that, when are you going to post content so that you can measure those things and it's not just going on forever, even if you're reusing eventually the same material later, but you want to kind of see what worked, where it worked. Sometimes it's a question of maybe you put more money into TikTok and less into Twitter, whatever it is, right? You want to always take a moment and evaluate, right? We used to call it postmortems when I worked for a web design agency. When you finish the project, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what can be improved, where are areas of opportunity, all those kind of questions,
Is that something where you want to run an A/B test or just see if it worked? And
you could definitely, that's always good to do within a campaign. What versions of the same idea work better, and to whom? You might find that a version A works really well with one demographic and works better with another, and you might find I was saying earlier, you might have a campaign for a certain product, let's say, right? And we're getting closer to Christmas, right? I'm already hearing Christmas music in stores, right?
I was in Home Depot yesterday and they have their full Christmas displays up. The whole thing.
I mean, but you start thinking so when you come to a holiday season, right? I mean, I know this year's a bit bizarre, but I mean, even then, So you would want to think about, how can you reach, like I was saying before, the people who love or are in relationships with people who would be using your products, so that you could reach out to them and maybe sell them like a coupon or a gift card to use for your product, right? Like, so you might find that you might have let's say a package, like we were talking about packages before, right? So maybe you want to promote that package both to your users, but also to the people, who might buy it, like a gift card for that package as a gift for those people. So that could be another option for you too.
It is, and you just gave me a whole thought of selling safety and protection, and peace of mind, kind of like for a Christmas campaign too.
Yeah, definitely.
Man.
All right,
you
and
can use a little spoof with Santa coming down the chimney, right, and getting soot all over the furniture, right? So that's an interior clean, right? I don't know.
oh, holy crap! We're gonna do a call. You're gonna be so sick of me because you're right. What if Santa came and got in his sleigh, but he had interior protection in his car and it just wiped right out?
Think how dirty that sleigh gets, right? Like,
holy moly! And is advertising a separate job from marketing, or do the two of those? Because usually when there's a marketing company, they want us to get content from elsewhere. And I think that they should be very heavy in helping you organize that content bit. And
right. Marketing is typically like marketing is like the general in the tent kind of a thing. And then sales, I usually equate to like foot soldiers, and then advertising is more like the psyops, marketing is usually like where the strategy starts. And then advertising and sales are kind of like the implementation of it, right? They're more like hands-on implementation. So you have to have the starting point in marketing, because that ties it all together. That's more of your strategic center, basically. But advertising is one way of communicating that marketing message, right? Getting it out there to the public.
Man, I think that every podcast could be about marketing. There's so much, and it's so deep, and it
really could.
I don't think that you can. There's not enough hours in the day to do everything. And it's something like this that is so important, whether you think it is or not. It really is. This is something that you have to bring somebody else in to do. It just is.
Because you get too close to yourself too, or your products, and it's like, if you remember to your college days, sometimes you write a paper. And, like if you're like me, you probably did it the night before, which I'm still doing. But even though I try to warn my students not to do that, do as I say, not as I do. But, you write it and you read it and it makes sense. And then the minute you email it or submit it or whatever, then you go, I don't know, you get something to eat, you watch a show, you come back and you read it again. You're like, oh my God, what did I write? Right? Like, or you look at something, sometimes I'll look at like a story I wrote like years later and I'm like, what idiot wrote this? Oh, that was me. Like, so we overlook stuff if we're too close to it, right? It's not even about missing errors, but sometimes it's like, if you've ever had a conversation with someone and they're starting a conversation to you, what feels like in the middle of a conversation, and you're missing some context, right? But it's in their head, they're very clear on what they're talking about, but they've sort of forgotten to clue you in on that first part. So sometimes when we do our own marketing, we just take things for granted. We assume people will know what we're talking about, but maybe we're overlooking obvious things or simple things. Like, if you go back to when I was doing technical writing, we would go so far as to define what words meant that would follow in the procedure. Because if I use a certain word, maybe it has multiple meanings, and if I don't clarify what I mean by that word, people might use the wrong tool or whatever. So from a marketing perspective, we even get caught up in our own jargon sometimes, right? And people outside of us might not even understand what we're talking about. Even if they're in the industry, you might have a vernacular that you use or acronyms or whatever within your product lines or your business, and if you're not clear about what those are, you might have a whole campaign of people who don't even know what you're talking about.
Even the term detailing itself means something different to so many people.
And I think we market ourselves a lot towards our competition. So we talk about technical terms like paint correction, outside the industry, people think I'm talking about painting cars. When you talk paint correction to the average Joe, he thinks, oh, so you guys paint cars? No, we're correcting paint. That's a very technical term that we usually use a lot, but for our public, it doesn't apply. If you talk about power polishing or removing scratches or whatnot, that's way more relevant than talking about paint corrections that your client's not going to understand unless he follows some YouTube channels or whatnot. But yeah, you got to marketing towards your client, not towards your competition and friends and whatnot.
And to that point, the forest for the trees, we, are in business to clean people's cars every day. And my tenant, Scott, he works for SEMA, and he's into cars. And I have all the stuff in the garage, and I'm like, yeah, you can use it and wash your car whenever you want. And he used the Eco Wash, but without knowing, because it's a rinseless wash. Well, in my head, a rinseless wash means you're not going to rinse it off after you're done, right? But after he was done, he rinsed it off, and it was hot outside, and the sun hit the side of it and made water spots all over the side of his car, which were easy to fix with Spotless. But right. the point, before I started detailing, there was a little paint transfer on the door of a car, and I had no idea that you could just take some polish and rub that, and it would go away. So the people. And this is something, I think this is another opportunity for us, Paulo, is to do some kind of a campaign that's direct to consumer to help answer those questions. And that's a retail play on that side of the fence. But to just really break down these simple things that we know for car washing and yeah. Okay.
And honestly, that could even be a good, maybe even a micro campaign. Like you were just talking about, like getting rid of paint transfer. So, think about things like people park in a parking lot, right? And they get dings, or people open the doors, right? Like everyday things, like here are some everyday problems that you could fix with XYZ product, whichever one it is, right? Just, 5-step solutions or something like that, right? Like show people how to like fix like an everyday thing, like a door. I don't know what a door ding, but obviously a paint transfer or something like that, mm-hmm. right? Or even maybe if you can by hand, not buff out a scratch, but do something to sort of minimize how prominent it is. And maybe that's an easy fix for an average person to do, right? So maybe you have like a 3-minute video on how to do it, like a how-to, that kind of a thing, Yeah,
and then that's just giving value to people. And okay, we got one more of these. And usually I cap these things at an hour, but I am having a great time and a great conversation with you. So we're gonna hammer through here and get this last one. And then I'm going to have you back again for talking about management and
no problem,
because that's a whole nother thing. Okay, so the last one that you have here is how propose your strategic goals and financial projections. And I bet this is a part that a lot of people miss, especially with the financial projections, because they're not thinking deep enough for that part. Now, I will tell you very clear. I mentioned this at the beginning of this podcast. Clark, one of our bosses, financial projections is his life. He is numbers, and my last company was not so centered and focused on that. But please tell us.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, when I've given assignments like this to my students, this is the hardest one for them because they always say, well, how am I supposed to know this stuff, right? So, but I tell them, even if it's theoretical, like even if you're kind of coming up with an idea, you can still propose like percentages or by what percentage you want things to increase. This needs to be quantifiable, So even if you say we want our brand awareness to increase, how are you measuring that, right? Maybe you survey people before you start the campaign, like how have you, questions about like, have you heard of us? What do you think of the brand? And then, you survey people after to see if those numbers increase, right? You need to be able to have a way of measuring in a quantifiable way. So like you were saying, that gentleman at your company, you definitely need somebody like that who's really good with this stuff, because that's ultimately how you determine if it works or not, right? And it's also about being realistic too, right? You don't want to say like, we're going to, increase our sales by $1 million in a month or something, right? I mean, if you're Ferrari, that's possible, I suppose. But, so you also want to be realistic so that your goals are achievable, that they aren't ridiculously outlandish, but that they're, measurable, achievable, realistic, that kind of a thing. So your goals are both what you hope to achieve through your campaign, and again, they need to be measurable. And then your financial projections follow. So usually what I'll tell my students if they kind of find themselves a little bit confused with this part is, well, just do some math, right? Think about, okay, how much, each product costs you, how much you sell it for, what's the difference? And then estimate what quantity you think you sell or you want to sell through your campaign and use that as some kind of barometer, right? So think about how much revenue you might want to generate. Years ago, I worked for an organization, more of a marketing management / analytical role. And the company was actually like a nonprofit organization of sorts, quasi-nonprofit. And it was basically an entity that sold training and supplies to notaries. And my position was I would put together packages for people who just became a notary. Now, this is kind of in the mid-2000s when real estate was going crazy and everyone was doing document signings and these kind of things. So we would put together packages of things like a booklet with like the state laws, like a stamp, like a book to record things, and like some combination of things. And we would use this crazy Excel spreadsheet that I actually still have somewhere. And we would put in the price for each item, right? And then our cost and what we would want to charge for it. And then we'd have a little section of the Excel spreadsheet that would predict the possible revenue from a low, medium, and high response. So I think the low response was 1%, or maybe even 0.5%. I think the medium response was 2 or 3%, and the high was 5%. So most marketing campaigns have a pretty low percentage of conversion, but if you're realistic with that, you can work within the realm of possibility. So what they would most often do is if your campaign would show any kind of potential revenue, even by 1 penny, because they were really trying to grow market share. So even if your lowest projections showed some even small amount of revenue, they would approve it because they just wanted to keep increasing market share and the number of customers. But again, that comes back to your strategic goals. Right? If your strategic goals is to generate, increase your revenue, your profit, you might want to have a minimum percentage of profit, right? Like our minimum of acceptable is that we want to make a minimum of, 5% off of each sale, whatever it is. So you want to be sure to not proceed with a campaign that you can't project would achieve those goals.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to ask you that, not that you haven't been, but you're going to be the professor for a minute and give me assign me some homework. So, what's a great book for me to throw into my Audible account for marketing?
I'm trying to think of the best one. I'll be honest with you. The books that I find fascinating. There's a book. Let me see if we can find it. There's a book I'm actually having one of my students do as an honors project, and one area of marketing that always fascinates me is what's called behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is kind of a newer area of study that has a lot to do with the irrationality of people. I'm just going to my my list here as we're talking, if I can find it. And I'm trying to find the book specifically. It was a really interesting book, and I'm trying to see if I could find it.
Initially, that sounds like it's going to be almost like try to like scare marketing to make it irrational. Like, if you don't get this product, your life is going to fall apart. You're not going to get a penny for your car when you go trade it in.
Well, not exactly. What the interesting thing about behavioral economics is, so traditional economics presumes that people are logical, rational creatures. Mostly we're not, right? A lot of times we'll buy a product and then we reverse engineer a reason why. Like if you're Paulo and you're in Canada, where I think you said it's now -10 degrees, right? And you say, I want to buy a convertible, right? And maybe you can use that convertible 3 months out of the year. I don't know, Paulo, what the weather's like all the year. And so you don't get a lot of use out of that convertible, right? But you justify it like, well, I like the feel of the wind in my hair, even if it's only for 6 weeks in the year, right? Like, it depends what the weather's like. But we tend to buy things often for more irrational reasons, but then we find reasons to make them sensible, right?
Yeah. I'm going through my own purchases in my head going, yeah.
Let me see if I can find. I'm looking. Where did it go? I have a pretty detailed folder structure here, but I can't remember where I put it. So
did I cut you off, Paulo?
No.
Okay.
I like that concept. I really like that concept.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And so, well, there's one book. It's a little bit older that I've loved. It's called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. And he was one of the first people that I sort of became aware of that researches this. And he's out of Duke. He teaches at Duke. And he studies this a lot. And he puts together these fascinating – he has a video that I showed to my students. And he talks about this fascinating concept where – and I often will kind of gently use that word manipulate. But I try to kind of couch it within a term of more like – persuade, right? But it's a fine line, right? But he gives this example where, like, let's say you want to sell a trip to Paris, right? So you have a trip to Paris with everything included, and then you have a trip to Rome, and it's essentially the same arrangement, right? But then if you want people to buy the trip to Paris, you offer a third option, which is like a trip to Paris, but you have to pay for your luggage. Right, so it's a similar but slightly less beneficial option, and that automatically skews the brain to the superior option where there are two similar options, right?
The easier one, yeah.
Yeah. So a slightly less attractive version of an offer makes the other one look better, and your brain just ignores the third one as an outlier, like it's not even related, right? So that is one strategy that really, comes to mind. So that whole area of behavioral economics is really an interesting one.
Okay, and it was called Predictably Irrational by Dan
Ariely. Let's see.
Good. If that's available, I'm gonna get that thing queued up for me. So Matthew, this has been great. It's a topic that I really like because it's just so relevant for any business, and it's something that a lot of people, I think, don't really handle properly, and it doesn't unlock the potential that they might have to really, really grow. And holy moly, again, here's the intro list. What a great, what a good podcast, man. Thank you so much for taking some.
By the way, I did find the other book if you want to add this to the list.
Oh, I do.
Okay, it's similar. It's called Marketing to Mind States, the Practical Guide to Applying Behavior Design to Research and Marketing.
Did you just read the whole book, or was that the title?
No, that's the title.
What did you say? Marketing Mind Space. Is that what you said? Marketing Mind Space?
Marketing to Mind States.
To Mind States.
States. Okay. That's stage.
Oh my goodness, man! I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and thank you so much, Paulo. Always a pleasure to hang out with you.
Thanks, guys. I think we need to record the second one.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, and I want to hit that management side too. That's a newer side of what I'm doing. I have a sales team that's underneath me that I'm essentially responsible for it. I'm trying to be the best leader and be really empathetical and, not be a top down or douchebag, but cool. But then there's that line that you can't be too cool because, right. But anyways, yeah. Like you said, that's a whole nother podcast.
It is. So
thank you, Matthew. I guess we don't really have a website or anything to tell people to go look at your stuff, right?
Oh, you do? I do.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my website is my name. It's MatthewAGilbert.com. and it's 2 T's, MATTHEW, middle initial A, and last name Gilbert.com.
Okay, so check out MatthewAGilbert.com. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your life and to join a brother for the Owner's Pride podcast. And now I do this part too because of the changed format. I've recently started putting these onto YouTube, so I add this part into the podcast. And thank you for listening to the Owner's Pride podcast. Questions and comments, leave them for us on the Owner's Pride podcast Facebook page. Please like, subscribe, and share. I do it for you. Until next time, stay glossy.
We hope you've enjoyed today's presentation of the Owner's Pride podcast. To learn more about our products, become an authorized installer, or to get a quote, visit ownerspride.com.